Before there was Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, and even Final Fantasy IV, there was Drakkhen. It was officially the first role-playing game on the SNES, released in 1991 when the system was still young. At the time, I was a young RPG enthusiast that had played and replayed the Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest games on the NES. When I picked up this title way back then, I was super excited to see what the SNES could offer for RPGs. And well, as it turned out, Drakkhen was a mixed bag. One of the things I liked about this game was that you have the power to craft a customized group of 4 different characters from the start. The class options are Fighter, Scout, Magician, and Priest, and just like any RPG, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. In this way, it was like a more limited version of the original Final Fantasy game, but Drakkhen does let you allocate skill points in various combinations as well. I like this concept because of the customization. Your party truly became your own. Drakkhen is an adventure game, but with some RPG elements thrown in. That's about the best way I can describe it. It reminds me quite a bit of the old King's Quest titles for the PC, but it is more RPG oriented than those games. When you first play this one, you can't help but realize that much of it focuses on exploration and discovery. The maps are large, and you are forced to go from place to place with little to no direction. Also, it's very easy to stumble upon ridiculously powerful enemies by accident, just by wandering too far away from where you're supposed to be. The menu to control your actions is on the right-hand side of the screen, and this is how you can get information about your surroundings, pick up objects and items, and attack enemies. The combat is just weird and quirky, and Drakkhen essentially plays itself in all the battles. The results are determined by the power of your items and how you allocated your skill points at the beginning of the game, but I just wish you were given more control over what happens. It's hard to track your progress against enemies, and you just don't get to make many strategic decisions that benefit you. It just isn't as rewarding as one would expect a game like this to be. Another thing that just sucks is that instead of a typical RPG where experience points are divided among the party, in Drakkhen only the party member that lands the finishing blow on the monster receives the benefit. This forces the player to have to go to stupid lengths, like placing non-damage spells on all but one character, just so experience is evenly divided. It's utterly frustrating. To make your way through Drakkhen, you have to discover dungeons and castles, find special items, and defeat powerful monsters. In the castle areas, there are usually many rooms to explore, with secret passages and basic puzzles to solve. Unfortunately though, you really don't get many good hints about where to go, and even when you do, the clues themselves are often unclear. Sometimes you get an actual cardinal direction, like we do from this weird dragon dude here, but not always. If I called it convoluted, that might be a charitable description. The story of the game is hard to fully decipher, but it revolves around collecting blue artifacts called tears. You and your party's goal is to prove your worth to Drakkhen, who will spare his wrath on the troubled Draconian people if his tears can be returned. Apparently, the game was originally created in French, then translated into Japanese, and then translated into English. As a result, many of the particulars of the lore seem to have been obscured, and we are just left with a lot of confusion. It sounds weird, but there were some moments in this game that actually startled me back in the day. For instance, as you approach this column, a green lizard-like monster just jumps out and threatens you out of nowhere. Also, some of the enemy attack animations are downright creepy and a bit humorous. Even though some of the sound effects are super odd and frankly out of place, I did think the music was actually very well done. It won't blow you away like some of the best RPG soundtracks on the system or anything like that, but the songs fit the fantasy theme pretty well. Drakkhen was originally developed for the Amiga and Atari ST, so the graphics aren't much better than an NES game. However, that really isn't what bothers me most about it. The gameplay is just brutal. I really wanted to like this game, and on the surface it seemed like the right game for me. The role-playing theme and fantasy setting were definitely to my fancy, but this game just fell flat. This opinion may be controversial to some though, because I know this is a polarizing game. I found several people that just love it, but I can't pick this one up and play it like I can a true RPG classic of the era. The few things I liked were overshadowed by lackluster gameplay, and it's just too bad. I was disappointed with this game in 1991, but thankfully Final Fantasy IV was just around the corner back then. The good thing is that a better sequel to this game was released years later. In Japan it was called Super Drakkhen, but in the United States it was released as Dragon View in 1994. Apparently, the Kemco marketing team wanted to get away from the stigma of the Drakkhen name, and I really can't blame them for that. Even if you don't like Drakkhen at all, don't skip out on Dragon View. That one is very good. It has some similarities, but it went to a fully action RPG format, and it really worked well. Back in the early days of the SNES, an RPG called Drakkhen received quite a bit of hype. When it was finally released, it would have been an understatement to say that it was met with split reactions. Some players liked the game for its free-roaming open-world perspective and its statistic-based advancement system. Others complained about the automated combat, subpar gameplay, and lack of direction. Drakkhen sold 350,000 copies in North America, which wasn't bad, but the game got bad reviews. It wasn't much of a surprise then when Kemco decided to market its sequel, Super Drakkhen, under a completely different name. Enter Dragon View, which was released on the SNES in November of 1994. Dragon View diverged in several major ways from Drakkhen. Probably the most apparent difference is that the combat style was changed completely. Instead of controlling a full group of characters that battle it out mostly on the basis of artificial intelligence, Dragon View embraces a straight-up action RPG system where the player controls a single character. In this one, you explore dungeons in a side-scrolling view where you can only move up and down a small amount. You can slash your sword in ways that will be familiar to those that played A Link to the Past or the Ys games, and you can even do jump attacks. The controls are very smooth, and you can tell a lot of time was put into it. As an action RPG hybrid, this one really emphasizes action. I really like how the damage you deal to enemies is represented in numerical form, because this provided an added statistical touch that most action RPG hybrids didn't have. Also, each enemy has a visual health bar, which is also appreciated. As you progress through the game, you gain levels, find new weapons and armor, and equip special items to aid you. For instance, as in A Link to the Past, you have to use bombs at times to clear your way through large boulders that obstruct your journey. Enemies sometimes drop hearts to refill your health, and Jade, the game's currency. There's a magic system as well, and you can learn new spells throughout the game. I thought the bosses were well designed also. They had their own unique abilities and attack patterns that you had to overcome. One distinct part of Dragon View that sets it apart from other games is that the title's script is delivered in a narrated form, rather than through direct dialogue. The storyline really does adopt the typical RPG tropes. For instance, the main character is an unknown hero whose girlfriend is kidnapped at the very beginning of the game by a strange adversary. The game gives you much better direction than Drakkhen did, which is certainly a good thing, but you still have open freedom to explore. As far as fantasy games of this type, all the cliches are here, and the story is really cheesy. Even so, it's about what you'd expect from a game in this era. If you thought Drakkhen was convoluted, and it was, you'll probably enjoy the way this one plays a lot more. The biggest similarity to Drakkhen that Dragon View adopted was the first-person, free-roaming overworld perspective. This portion of the game uses Mode 7 in the same way as Drakkhen does, and you'll be seeing a lot of it because there's a lot of travel between towns and dungeons. In the overworld, you can get into encounters where you can go back into side-scrolling mode to do combat with enemies. Also, because the potential of encounters appear as clouds, you can easily avoid them and run past. If you hate RPGs with high random encounter rates, this may be one you want to try. The game's biggest downside, outside of the relatively dull storyline, is the huge status interface that takes up over a third of the screen. I get that it contains a lot of important info to keep track of, but come on. For an action RPG, this really was a burden because it constrains all the gameplay into a small subsection of the screen. If the status indicators were made a lot smaller, like they are in, say, the Ys games or A Link to the Past, there would have been a lot more room to explore and expand the gameplay in ways that allowed you to move up and down. At any rate, Dragon View was a fun game that was a big improvement over Drakkhen. The combat is intuitive and interactive, unlike the first game, and the gameplay is just a lot more polished in general. I mean, you didn't risk falling asleep in the battles in this one. The soundtrack is pretty reminiscent of Drakkhen, which is actually a good thing. That was probably the most redeemable aspect of the original. I think the game is a little bit on the easy side, but there are some puzzles and special item requirements the game forces you to figure out on your own. Dragon View is well worth playing, and won't disappoint you the way Drakkhen would if you tried to play it today. Even if they don't get credit for anything else, Drakkhen and Dragon View should both be commended for utilizing some very innovative and unique ideas for their time. In Drakkhen's case, This was by bringing the PC adventure-style game to a home console, which emphasized exploration with little direction. When it came to Dragon View, this was done by making the experience into more of an action game than an RPG, and giving the player much more control over combat. Whatever nostalgia the series brought, there's been no indication that it will ever be revived. Kemco closed its North American offices in 2007, and has since shifted its focus in Japan to mobile games. Even so, both titles still get some coverage by the retro community, and many gamers my age still remember them. For retro fans that want to give the series a try, the Drakkhen games can easily be replayed today. Surprisingly, both Drakkhen and its sequel, Dragon View, can be found on Steam for $4.99 each. It's pretty rare to find SNES games on this platform, and almost everyone has access to it, so it's a great option. At the very least, give Dragon View a try. I think that one holds up a lot better in general. If you like this series retrospective and remember Drakkhen or Dragon View, leave a comment below about the most memorable aspect of the series to you. If you like my videos, please subscribe to my channel and click the bell below to be alerted upon the addition of new ones. Also, please consider supporting my channel via YouTube's Join feature to receive member exclusives, such as advanced videos and complete video transcripts.